Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
My goodness, we got a lot to cover this morning.
Yes.
And we're supposed to be getting ready for our daughter's birthday.
Yeah, I know.
First of all, before we get into the petition, we've got something Mike wants to cover, and we want to thank Charles so much. He actually sends us a lot of research that he has been doing, and this is a good one for you Jehovah's Witnesses.
Yeah, so, pay attention, because being ex-members, we are very well aware how the Watchtower Bible Tract Society tries to sell their governing body as the anointed of Jehovah. And we also know how they twist the scriptures around to make you Jehovah's Witnesses believe that even in the early stages of Christianity at Acts 15, this is a scripture they use to point to the fact that there was a governing body controlling the early Christian congregation. And because of the amount of research and studying that Kim and I's audience are doing, many things are pointed out that contradict Watchtower's theology. Now, when Kim and I first woke up, we did a very lengthy video regarding or challenging Watchtower's theology, whether there was a governing body in the first century or not. And we covered it very much in depth, and a lot of it had to surround the Apostle Paul. But this was a scripture that we didn't use at the time, and someone has brought this to our attention. So we're going to recover this again just real quickly to help you Jehovah's Witnesses realize that the Apostle Paul was on his own. He didn't follow the direction of a so-called first century governing body. And we hope that you Jehovah's Witnesses will understand what you're being told right here. So why don't you read that, since it's fine print. And Jehovah's Witnesses, this scripture I'm going to read comes from your own revised New World Translation.
So thank you, Charles. This is a screenshot from jw.org online Bible, 1 Corinthians 4:14 through 17. And a side note, the JWs have been screaming for years that the Catholic Church gives themselves prominent names, and one of those names is Father. But yet the Apostle Paul says that he has become a father to them as they are his children. I know about the scripture where Paul calls himself their father 4 years now, but I never noticed the my method before.
Right. You see, and with the study and research that I've done regarding the early development of Christianity, there was a tremendous amount of sects, tremendous amount of groups, and all of these groups had their own philosophical idea as to who Jesus Christ, the Messiah, truly was. And the Apostle Paul was one of these people. But if you don't read the scriptures with a mind to critical thinking, Jehovah's Witnesses, you're never going to pick this up, because your organization doesn't teach you to read scriptures critically.
There's even footnotes.
Yes. So let's read these scriptures from 1 Corinthians chapter 4, starting at verse 14. And you can see what the Apostle Paul is doing. He is setting himself up as a cult leader in the new emerging religion of Christianity. I am writing these things not to put you to shame, but to admonish you as my beloved children. There again, now he's claiming
Father.
He's claiming a fellowship. For though you may have 10,000 guardians, the footnote says, or tutors, in Christ, you certainly do not have many fathers. For in Christ Jesus I have become your father through the good news.
Didn't Jesus say not to call anyone on earth your father?
Do not be calling anyone on earth your father. Now here the Apostle Paul is claiming for himself the title of father, in direct contrast to Jesus' own words. Okay? I have become your father through the good news. I urge you, therefore, become imitators of me. He's not encouraging people to become imitators of Christ. He's encouraging his followers to become imitators of him. Here you have some of the early Christian, what you have here is early Christian divisions. And the Apostle Paul is setting this up for himself. Okay, verse 17. That is why I am sending Timothy, because he is my beloved and faithful child in the Lord. He will remind you of my methods. The footnote, because there's an asterisk here, and it says, the footnote says, my ways. Not the ways of the Lord, but my ways. And this is exactly what cult leaders do.
The point being is, if there was a first century governing body and he was supposed to be following the direction of the governing body, why is it his way and not the older men of Jerusalem?
Right.
AKA the governing body.
Right. So he says, speaking of Timothy, he will remind you of my ways in connection with Christ Jesus, just as I am teaching everywhere in every congregation. So the Apostle Paul very clearly in these scriptures has set himself up as a self-proclaimed apostle of Jesus, the self-proclaimed father, and he's claiming early Christianity as his children. Not children of the Lord, but his. So Jehovah's Witnesses, start reading your Bibles with a view to critical thinking, because your freedom is in these very words.
Okay, now time for the petition. I printed up all 103 pages of this, and I read all 303 pages of this. A lot of legalese, a lot of stuff that Watchtower is claiming that, you know, their amendments were violated in the California case. And I just want to mention that many of us thought that there was only one case that they were being fined daily for not producing documents. No, there was actually two in California where they were supposed to produce their pedophile list and failed to do so. But there was some interesting stuff that came up in here. And this is why I wanted to cover this petition, because there is some very interesting stuff in here. Okay, the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society of New York versus J.W.A. Minor. And we know this is a petition to the Supreme Court. All right, now there's like a foreword or like an introduction. So on number 1 it says questions presented. Second paragraph. Here, Petitioner Watchtower sought to protect confidential intrafaith communications among clergy, parentheses, elders, regarding Bible-based religious appointment processes, some of which included congregants' penitential confessions, and all of which impacted privacy rights of non-parties, aka the pedophile list. Right. Database, that database that we all know about. And for the apologists and XGWs who says there is no such thing, then why would Watchtower be admitting this to the courts? Back to the second paragraph. California targeted the faith of Jehovah's Witnesses and impermissibly intruded upon matters of church governance, religious doctrine, and religious practice when it ordered Watchtower to produce these intra-faith communications. Without a trial, California imposed on Watchtower an unprecedented theory of liability for congregants' criminal conduct during non-church activity. Parentheses, a Saturday afternoon pool party at a private home. Now, there's a reason why the lawyers wanted this pedophile database, because it showed, you know, how things work within Watchtower. And so Watchtower is claiming they have nothing to do with these non-church activities. So how can they possibly, protect the children? But that's not the point it boils down to. The point boils down to is Watchtower's policy of not reporting these, incidences of child abuse and allegations to the authorities and let them investigate it. That's what it boils down to. And I hope the Supreme Court is smart enough to figure out Watchtower is trying to weasel their way out of this.
Right, because there's a lot more involved in this whole situation as ex-members that we know about. Because, see, the Watchtower Bible Tract Society encourages its members not to have any association outside of church members. They don't encourage their kids to go to college. They don't encourage their kids to get involved with extracurricular school activities. Why? Because any association with non-members is a threat to the member themselves, because the non-member has the ability to help the Jehovah's Witness realize they're in a cult. So any activity that is arranged by Jehovah's Witnesses, any social activities, is not going to include anybody outside of the Jehovah's Witnesses. So by extension, you very well could classify these as church activities.
Well, it makes you wonder. We were told years ago not to call it like congregation picnics, congregation get-togethers. And I'm wondering now if this is why. Because they wanted to distance themselves from church activities or non-church activities because these lawsuits were starting to be brought up.
And the thing is that if somebody does organize a little get-together that's not a sanctioned church activities, if something goes awry, then why do the members that put these activities together get hauled in the back room and counseled by elders after the fact?
Yeah. Now,
See?
Another thing that, we're going to find in here is that they're basically throwing the elders under the bus, and it's going to be the elders' responsibility now in the congregations. And we know from recent Watchtower study articles that they're making it the parents' responsibility to take care of your own kids. And I think this is why, because they're trying to appeal to the Supreme Court of the United States that they're not responsible. That's what all of these 103 pages boils down to. Now, on the Roman numeral page 4, just this one little paragraph. Oh boy, there's a lot in this one little paragraph. Corporate disclosure statement. Watchtower Bible Tract Society of New York is a 501c3 nonprofit corporation organized under the laws of the state of New York with offices in Paterson, New York. Its primary purpose is religious, and its primary goal is and has been to support the religious activities of Jehovah's Witnesses in the United States. Watchtower was the national office formerly involved in the affairs of the congregations prior to March of 2001. Now pay attention, Jehovah's Witnesses, because we always believed that the Watchtower of New York, the society as we would call them, was responsible for the affairs of the congregation. According to their petition here, they are not.
And that's been since 2001.
Yeah, Watchtower was a national office formerly involved in the affairs of the congregations prior to March of 2001. Brackets, former national office. It has no parent corporation, and no publicly held corporation owns 10% or more of its stock. Now, for them to mention that, that means that they do have publicly held corporation stock.
That's right.
Okay, now I'm going to interrupt reading of this petition right here to bring up a kingdom ministry that I just happen to have. This is the January 2002. And I actually have the hard copy here of this. Now over on page 7, under announcements, if you look in the middle column here, right here, the second point down, when the presiding overseer receives the New York Corporation statement each month, he should see that all acknowledgments of contributions for the Society Kingdom Hall Fund and for the worldwide work are read to the congregation with the next accounts report. Now this is going to go into play further when they try to distance themselves and say they have no affiliation with the congregations. Now it's interesting because on this same page you will see new corporations formed. And they have 3 corporations here that they formed in 2002. And it makes me wonder if it isn't because of this. The January 15, 2001 issue of the Watchtower reported on the organized way in which Jehovah's Witnesses are continuing to move forward with the kingdom work in all the earth. No, I think it's to protect their backsides.
That's right. It's to protect their assets.
Yeah. Now, the first corporation listed down here, about 2/3 of the way down, is the Christian Congregation of Jehovah's Witnesses. Now, from here on out, we're going to call it the CCJW. Second one is the Religious Order of Jehovah's Witnesses. Now, we know they're the ones that are over the circuit overseers, the special pioneers, the missionaries, those that are, you know, part of the hierarchical within the organization. And then the third corporation is the Kingdom Support Services, and we know that has to do with you know, the building committee and all of that. They even have their own website, you know, for selling tools and stuff.
But see, the Jehovah's Witness sitting in the Kingdom Hall reading and listening to these things being read will not comprehend or even begin to think why the Watchtower Bible Tract Society needs so many corporations to get the good news of the kingdom preached. This is why Jehovah's Witnesses, you need to start thinking critically about what is going on and what has been going on since 2001.
Yeah.
Why they have to separate themselves from the congregations. If you have a proclaimed governing body, then this governing body would not need so many religious corporations to direct you.
How many corporations did Jesus Christ need?
Exactly.
Okay, now getting into the meat of the petition on page 2, there's a subheading, Statement of the Case. This case involves a congregant who abused the child of a co-congregant in a family swimming pool during a private, non-church related party in Southern California, resulting in a multi-million-dollar judgment against Watchtower without a trial. Wah, wah, wah. Why was Watchtower punished by the California courts? Because it conscientiously refused to break the confidentiality of confession and violate the privacy rights of individuals not involved in this case by producing intrafaith communications among clergy, brackets, elders, regarding Bible-based religious appointment processes. Now we know, we have always been told as Jehovah's Witnesses that they do not have a clergy class. They even had it on the front cover of an Awake magazine, and that magazine has been used in previous cases.
That's right.
So for them now to be crying confidentiality of confession among the clergy, this should be a real eye-opener for you Jehovah's Witnesses.
Right.
Now the next paragraph is really interesting too. Jehovah's Witnesses abhor child abuse. It is a serious sin. It is a horrible crime. Watchtower and Jehovah's Witnesses care deeply about all victims of child abuse, including this plaintiff, who may continue to long suffer the effects of this horrendous crime. But the fault in this case lies solely with the perpetrator, Gilbert Cimental, not with Watchtower. So they're trying to say they're not responsible. So that is telling me they're saying they're not responsible for all of these child abuse cases worldwide. So, you know, we hope and pray that the Supreme Court will see behind them trying to weasel out of this.
We also have to remember that it wasn't too many years ago, Kim and I remember this, when, you know, you would get a kingdom ministry or kingdom service where Watchtower was trying to encourage its members to get people baptized within 6 months. Well, within that study program, nobody could rightfully determine who a person was by getting them baptized within 6 months. And part of that problem with that entire study program comes right down to this little book. Now, I know the Watchtower Bible Tract Society is trying to distance themselves from any responsibility in their baptismal process. You have to recognize that before anybody is even given this book, they have to become an unbaptized publisher.
Qualify.
Qualify. You have to qualify. Who makes that determination? Well, it comes down to the elders asking questions provided by the Watchtower Corporation. Now, when you progress to the point of baptism, it's not the Christian Congregation of Jehovah's Witnesses that provides the answer or the questions. It's the Watchtower and Bible Tract Society's laid out questions that qualify you for baptism. Now, I have been a Jehovah's Witness long enough to know that there has been occasions when the elders feel the person trying to qualify for baptism doesn't qualify, so they'll hold off on that process for a few months until the next assembly that is put together, not by the congregation elders, but by the Watchtower and Bible Tract Society. So there is still responsibility that can be thrown back to the Watchtower and Bible Tract Society and its governing body, because they're the ones that provide the questions that determine whether somebody's qualified for baptism or not. And when you have a Bible study program that you're encouraging baptism within six months, that is not enough time to get to know who that person is, and there's never any background check done on those people.
Yeah, and we're going to cover that a little bit more here on page 3. Okay, so the first paragraph here on page 3. Watchtower had no notice that Simmental posed a danger to children, and plaintiff offered no evidence to the contrary. Moreover, some 5 years prior to the abuse, Watchtower was no longer the national office involved in the affairs of congregations of Jehovah's Witnesses in the United States. As of 2001, Christian Congregation of Jehovah's Witnesses, CCJW, a corporation plaintiff voluntarily dismissed, was the entity involved in the affairs of congregations. 7 years after the crime, plaintiff sued Watchtower, CCJW, Mountain View Congregation of Jehovah's Witnesses, and French Valley Congregation of Jehovah's Witnesses. Record 0155-0175. Watchtower had no contractual, legal, or financial relationships with French Valley Congregation or with Mountain View Congregation, the congregation with which plaintiff and Simmental worshipped. Watchtower's principal activities include providing religious office and residential facilities primarily in New York, and printing and publishing religious literature. Now, that goes back to what Mike was mentioning. The organization book is direction to the publishers, aka congregations. It is published by the Watchtower Bible Tract Society of New York. So for them to say they have no contractual, legal, or financial relationship with the congregation is hogwash. And like we mentioned in that KM, statements are sent to the to the presiding overseer, now the Kobe, for your donations. If congregations are making donations to the Watchtower Bible Tract Society, isn't that a financial affiliation?
Yes, it is.
An illegal affiliation. If you're getting statements of how much you sent to Watchtower, to me, that is a financial affiliation. So for them to say this, to me, this is an outright lie.
Yeah, and let's also keep in mind, too, that this particular organization book, its first printing was in 2005. 4 years after they claimed they separated themselves from the congregations and the corporate office. And you also have to keep in mind that this was also reprinted in 2015. Okay? This is 2019 now, so it's not that many years that they are still showing they have an affiliation with the congregations, what makes them responsible.
Not only that, we get elders' letters all the time. Guess who the letterhead is? The Watchtower Bible Tract Society. Now, we're all familiar with the 2012 Elders Manual. This is the 2012 printing. Made in the United States of America. Publishers, Watchtower Bible Tract Society of New York Incorporated, Brooklyn, New York. So if this is directions to the elders, they are affiliated with congregations, and they are directing the elders of how to handle these cases. And like I said, this is a biggie, because where do your donations go?
The
Watchtower.
Watchtower is bold-faced lying to the Supreme Court of the United States of America. Now keep this comment in mind, because they are fraudulently perpetrating this against the Supreme Court of the United States of America, and this is not the only court in the world that they are doing this to.
Yeah, exactly. Now, before I get into page 4 here, I want to mention that this perpetrator, Simon Tall, he was an elder, but not at the time of the abuse, which shouldn't make really a difference, but Watchtower is making it an issue. Page 4, the first paragraph. During the course of the court proceedings, plaintiff admitted that Simon Tall was not an elder in the congregation at the time of the abuse. Despite knowing that Simon Tall was simply a congregant at the time of the abuse, the complaint asserted that he was an elder in an attempt to create some form of organizational liability for the crime committed at a private gathering wholly unrelated to congregation parentheses church activities. Simon Tall had previously served as an elder in the Mountain View congregation, but 8 months before plaintiff's abuse, he was terminated parentheses deleted from his role as an elder for reasons unrelated to child abuse. So what the heck did he do?
That's right.
Yeah. And the congregation was informed by an announcement that he no longer served as an elder. But we all know that as Jehovah's Witnesses, we're taught to love our brothers and sisters and trust them. And, oh, well, he was an elder, so he should be safe. Going to page 5. Therefore, in March 1997, Watchtower undertook ecclesiastical measures to ensure that all United States congregations complied with the scriptural position on ecclesiastical appointments in the congregation. Because the previous paragraph was talking about how they're appointed by the scriptures. It communicated with elders in over 10,000 congregations nationwide. The intra-faith communications Watchtower received from elders in response contained information protected by the confidentiality of confession and sensitive, private information regarding the spiritual health of congregants, aka the pedophile database. Paragraph 2. California ordered Watchtower to disclose these nationwide responses. Watchtower complied with all orders to produce all documents it had about the perpetrator. However, Watchtower resisted disclosing intra-faith communications wholly unrelated to this case because they are confidential under the religious beliefs and practices of Jehovah's Witnesses. As a result, California issued terminating sanctions against Watchtower, and that was, what was it, $4,000 a day.
Yeah. What we have to keep in mind, friends, and Jehovah's Witnesses, the Watchtower Bible Tract Society, even your Christian congregation of Jehovah's Witnesses, even your own little Kingdom Hall in your neighborhoods are 501c3 non-profit organization. When any religious entity, or any person for that fact, becomes a 501c3, they are still controlled by the state. So the state can demand, by extension of the 501c3, to see all of your records. You lose that privilege of confidentiality when you become a 501c3. You have to understand that and how that 501c3 works when it comes to religions, because they are getting governmental favors. It's the government that is saying, okay, if you become a 501c3, you won't pay certain taxes. It's not God telling you people this, it's the government. It's still government control over your religion, even if it's a singular congregation.
Okay, page 6, the subheading is Reasons for Granting the Petition. California established a bewildering duty, applicable all day, every day, for the former National Office of Jehovah's Witnesses located in New York, parentheses, Watchtower, to supervise in perpetuity all congregants, even in their own homes, and even when there is no prior notice that an individual congregant poses a danger. No secular standard imposes such an onerous duty. The burden California places on religions to bear responsibility for criminal acts a congregant commits during non-church activities cannot be overstated. The remarkable and predictable result of that ruling will have devastating policy implications for all organizations. Simply put, the need for this court's intervention is of critical importance. And see, there again, they're playing the victim.
Right.
And that this was a violation, and oh, well, they can't possibly, supervise and bear responsibility for all congregants. But they're still missing the point. It's their policy of not reporting these cases and letting the authorities handle it, or discouraging the family and the victims from calling the police.
And it still goes right back to the Watchtower Bible Tract Society, your governing body. No matter how they try to spin this, still has control over the Christian congregation of Jehovah's Witnesses. All you have to do is go back and listen to Anthony Morris, one of his talks during one of their summer conventions, lay down a guideline for parents to follow. If your 16-year-old child is not baptized yet, then withhold the driver's license until they get baptized. That's what that all boils down to. So your governing body is still relating mandates that the Jehovah's Witnesses must follow.
Now, as we're going to get into it later, for Watchtower to have this in the petition, even me as a lay person with no legal training can see this is a bunch of hogwash, because later they admit that this guy molested others, and because they did nothing, these others were molested. So that right there should show the courts that they are responsible for not protecting the children when they knew after this case that he was going to recommit.
Right.
Now, I also want to mention right here, for an example, we heard that there is a Jehovah Witness down south here in the United States that is a known peeping Tom. Nobody will report it to the police. The sisters know about it, but he's still given privileges within the congregation. See, and that is the whole crux of this matter, is these people, these perpetrators, the elders will not warn the congregants of what is going on within the congregation. And that's why them and Watchtower should be held responsible, in my humble opinion. Because if they're not warning the congregation, if they are not doing anything about these perpetrators, you know, within the congregation, and they're allowed to run loose, of course the congregants are going to trust them. Well, the elders haven't disciplined them. So then that means they're okay to associate with. So Watchtower is responsible. Okay, we're going to go down to the third paragraph. California went beyond this split of authority and extended the theory of negligent hiring to a former elder. It also intruded into the religious sphere by examining matters of religious governance, destroying the confidentiality of confession by compelling production of interfaith communications, and eliminating the privacy rights of citizens throughout the United States.
And there again, since Watchtower and the local congregations are a 501c3, the state does have the authority to do that.
The next paragraph. Rather than allowing Watchtower the opportunity to adjudicate this case on its merits, California punished it. The state valued a mendacious complaint more than the United States Constitution. So Watchtower is saying, well, because you didn't allow us to handle this in-house, you know, you violated our rights. When it comes to child abuse,
Or crime.
it's a horrendous crime, and they shouldn't be allowed any amendment rights.
That's right.
Watchtower violated their amendment rights, and therefore no longer entitled it the moment they allow these horrendous crimes to happen to children. Page 7, down at the bottom, you know, they're claiming California violated the First and 14th Amendments when it expanded tort concepts to include liability for the criminal act of a congregant during non-church activity. So we're going to go down to the last paragraph. Requiring a church to accept or retain an unwanted minister, or punishing a church for failing to do so, intrudes upon more than a mere employment decision. Such action interferes with the internal governance of the church, depriving the church of control over the selection of those who will personify its beliefs. So what they're saying is, oh, you know, we should be allowed as a church to govern ourselves, and we choose who is in a position and who isn't. So you can see this is just utter shocking information.
Well, we just see how the Watchtower Bible Tract Society is trying to wiggle their way out of the issue that faces them utterly. That they've been hiding child sexual abuse. They've done nothing to protect the congregations, and everything that they're doing right now in these petitions to the United States Supreme Court is to protect their money.
Yeah, exactly. All right, we're going to go over to page 11, paragraph on the bottom, a couple of lines down. Simon Tall's appointment as an elder by CCJW was terminated by CCJW 8 months before the events given rise to plaintiff's claim. Now, this is a loaded sentence that we can glean a lot of information from, because this is telling you that the CCJW appoints elders. Now, we know they changed this several years ago, that the circuit overseer comes in now and at the elder's recommendation appoints these ministerial servants and elders. And we know that the circuit overseers are under, you know, the religious order. So Watchtower is saying that the CCJW appoints these elders, not Watchtower. So this is a good thing to know for those of you who are going to file court cases against Watchtower. Put all of their corporations, and then put
Jane Doe.
yeah, corporations.
So that way there, if during any court trial or investigating, you can find a Jane Doe corporation belonging to Watchtower and or any of its members, you want to include them in your lawsuits.
Yeah, and be sure to tell your lawyers that they'll pull a corporation, you know, out of the air and say, oh, well, they're responsible, not us.
See, and this is really sad for circuit overseers, because they're going to eventually get thrown under the bus. So you Jehovah's Witnesses, ex-Jehovah's Witnesses, pardon me, that are contemplating suing Watchtower for child sexual abuse, do not forget to include the circuit overseer that is serving your circuit at that time, because he is also responsible, because he is the one making the appointments now. Don't forget that, ex-Jehovah's Witnesses. You need to smarten up and you need to understand what Watchtower is doing here. And if we can start getting some of these circuit overseers, these branch managers involved in these lawsuits, they're going to be less inclined to accept appointments. And who does the appointment come from? Hey, it goes right back to the Watchtower Bible Tract Society. Because these circuit overseers are only appointed by the Watchtower Bible Tract Society, so you can connect the dots still again right back to Watchtower.
Yeah, and be sure you get all these corporations, the elders. That's important. You need to name the elders, and like Mike said, the circuit overseer, and anybody else that has any control in the hierarchy of Watchtower, because they're going to try to weasel out of all these cases now. Okay, back to the petition. Despite this, California imposed a duty upon Watchtower to supervise Simmental, a congregant, during his personal activities at his home, simply because of a past religious appointment. So you can see, you know, they're just trying every lame excuse to get out of this.
Well, see, what the court is not going to recognize is that before these men are appointed by the CCJW, there are no background checks to his qualifications. They don't even question these men if they even have a good, firm hold on what the scriptures really say. They don't. These Jehovah's Witnesses that are appointed as elders don't go to any religious theological school. All their Bible training comes directly from the Watchtower Bible Tract Society. So there, once again, there is another connection to the fact that the Watchtower Bible Tract Society, no matter how many corporations they try to hide under, are still making these appointments. Because it's their Bible teachings, it's their knowledge. They don't go to any seminar to learn what the Bible really says. It's all kept in-house. So in-house, they are responsible.
Okay, back to the petition, same paragraph. In the process, California ignored the fact that Simmental's appointment was made by a different legal entity, CCJW, that neither Watchtower nor CCJW had noticed that Simmental was a danger to children, and that the decision created a duty into perpetuity.
See, now, you Jehovah's Witnesses have to also understand why you no longer have a theocratic ministry school. And the word school is the operative word, because in other countries, the Watchtower Bible Tract Society was under fire for not having background checks done on school teachers.
Yeah.
And that's why they dropped the theocratic ministry school, and now it's called the Christian Life and Ministry. So you have to try to understand, Jehovah's Witnesses, why these changes are being made, because the world at large really comprehends now that you have no formal training as teachers, and as teachers you need background checks, and these elders are not going through the background checks. That's why this organization is changing the way they are changing right now. In the world at large, the government and the court systems are understanding this now, finally.
Okay, page 12, point A. California's conflation of legal entities used by Jehovah's Witnesses violated the Establishment Clause. The next paragraph. California eviscerated a religion's right to establish its own ecclesiastical structure through the use of multiple legal entities. Basically saying, we have a right to all these legal corporations, you know, just because you're going after us when it's the other corporation's fault. But the thing is, they all use the same legal department. So
Right.
that connects all of them.
It's right.
Let's hope the courts are smart enough to understand that. If you use the same legal department, the same lawyers, then that makes you all one entity.
That's right.
Okay, then they have quoted the Serbian Eastern Orthodox Diocese for United States and Canada versus Milovojevic. The First and 14th Amendments permit hierarchical religious organizations to establish their own rules and regulations for ... government. So they're quoting this court case and saying they have the right for hierarchical religious organizations to establish their own rules. That's probably talking about the two-witness rule.
Right.
The next paragraph. California ignored the fact that Watchtower's role as the national office ended in 2001.
But they're using the same lawyers in all these corporations.
And donations are still going to
They
Watchtower.
still go to Watchtower, exactly.
Watchtower was not involved with activities of local congregations at times relevant to this case. That's a big question mark, because if you're still getting donations from them and still directing them.
But not only that, their Shepherd of the Flock book still mandates that their elders contact Watchtower World Headquarters first before going to the authorities to get legal advice. So, contrary to what they are saying here, they are involved in the activities of the local congregations.
The letter we received from lawyer Mario about our judicial hearing, you know, when we accused them of harassing us, the letterhead was the Watchtower Bible Tract
Right.
Society. It didn't say CCJW. It said Watchtower. So, you know, when these elders call the legal department, it's Watchtower. Plaintiff acknowledged that CCJW supported the congregations in place of Watchtower. Notwithstanding, California held Watchtower liable for a religious appointment CCJW made.
And that's probably because it was made known to the California court system that it is the Watchtower Corporation making the appointments of the circuit overseers. Also should be identified as regional managers.
Yeah. Now, page 13, point B. California's shocking expansion of negligent hiring retention to include former clergy places a burden on religion in violation of the Free Exercise Clause. And like I've mentioned before, I do think Watchtower and all its corporation entities are responsible. The next paragraph. Even had Simon Toll not been terminated, he had been, and even had Watchtower been on notice that he was dangerous, any duty to supervise would be limited to his ecclesiastical activity. California's creation of the unprecedented duty to supervise a former elder during his personal activities unconstitutionally burdens the religion. Now, right there, that is saying they're not responsible for what these people do in their activities. But they still don't warn the congregations.
That's right.
You know, and they claim, oh, well, we didn't know he was a danger. But what about the other victims now? Why didn't you warn the congregations so that he didn't commit these crimes? The next paragraph. Watchtower repeatedly highlighted the absence of any connection between its religious activities and the social function where the criminal act occurred. Watchtower also repeatedly argued that it had no relationship with either the plaintiff or Simmental and thus owed no duty to protect plaintiff or supervise Simmental. So this is why they feel they don't even have to warn you parents in a congregation, even if they know about a pedophile.
So if you're a Jehovah's Witness, a current Jehovah's Witness listening to this, understand what the Watchtower Bible Tract Society, the legal department, your governing body is stating in this paragraph. They owe no duty to protect you. You understand what they are telling the courts. As a religious entity, they have no duty to protect you. So then why is it, and you Jehovah's Witnesses know, that this organization continuously tells you to put your trust in the elders? Go back to your summer conventions when they are trying to convince you that at that critical time when the governments turn on you, you are to turn to your elders for what? Safety. That is a conflict in ideologies. They're telling you in your summer programs to trust your elders, but yet they're saying right here they have no duty to protect you. They are throwing all of you Jehovah's Witnesses under the bus.
Yeah.
They don't care about you. All they care about is the money that they're pulling out of your purses and your pocketbooks. That's all they care about. That is a statement that is going before the Supreme Court of the United States. And I hope that those judges on that panel reading this can recognize that as a religious organization, they do not care about you, because that is a statement made.
And they're not going to warn you parents. Now on page 14, they're restating this. Last paragraph. If a religion can be required to supervise a former congregation elder during personal activities in his private home, then secular businesses, charitable organizations, and every other entity with a former agent or an employee would be required to do the same. California's expansive new duty opens the floodgate of civil litigation that will inflict an onerous financial burden on charities and commercial enterprises alike. And I just want to make a comment here. It's not the supervision. It's about the policies and not warning the parents and not calling the authorities. That's the issue.
Stop deflecting, Watchtower, because that's all you're doing is you're deflecting from the issue. Your policies are truly what's being attacked here, but you're deflecting from the issue. Now here's the problem that this paragraph creates and why Watchtower is trying to deflect, because now Watchtower is trying to say, well, if you do this to me, you have to do this to every corporation. Look, every corporation in the state of California is not a religion. And what you are saying by extension is that if the Watchtower Bible Tract Society is going to be held responsible, then you have to make all other corporations responsible. That right there, friends, Jehovah's Witnesses, understand, comprehend that they are admitting the state has jurisdiction over them because they are a 501c3.
And also, they're forgetting the fact that if any of these other organizations has an ex-employee or some incident of child abuse within their organization, they will report it to the police and have it investigated.
And that's
So
why,
that's the difference.
and that's why many corporations this day and age are doing background checks on potential employees. It's more than just going through 100 and something questions and then saying, oh, you do qualify to be, you know, a door knocker, a publisher. They are doing criminal background checks. So this is a huge deflection by these lawyers, the Watchtower Bible Tract Society. They are deflecting from the issue. These other corporations do background checks.
Yeah. Back to the paragraph. Especially for claims like this one that involve uninsurable criminal misconduct. Going to page 15. At the top, California violated the First and 14th Amendments when it ordered production of the nationwide communications that were wholly unrelated to plaintiff's claims, and then punished Watchtower with terminating sanctions and judgment using a constitutionally infirm theory of liability, aka the pedophile database. So we're going to go down to the bottom paragraph. In 1997, when Watchtower was still involved in the affairs of congregations, it undertook ecclesiastical measures to ensure that elders, parentheses, clergy, met the scriptural qualifications set forth at 1 Timothy 3, 1 through 13.
Well, just let me interrupt for a second. We all know as Jehovah's Witnesses and former Jehovah's Witnesses what those qualifications are. And one of those qualifications is that they must have a good report from the outside. If the Watchtower Bible Tract Society has not put into practice doing background checks, then you will never ever know whether this person has the freeness of speech according to non-Jehovah Witness members.
And free from accusation.
And free from accusation if you don't do background checks. So again, this is loaded language that the Watchtower Bible Tract Society is hoping they can slip by the supreme justices in this country, because they're hoping that the Supreme Court justices will not catch or bother to read these scriptures that allow the qualification. And one of the qualifications is having a good report outside of the religious entity. If you don't do the background check, you'll never know whether a brother and a Jehovah Witness truly qualifies.
It communicated with elders in over 10,000 congregations nationwide. The intrafaith communications Watchtower received from elders became the focus of California's inquiry. So that right there tells me that even back in 1997, there was a tremendous amount of congregation files on pedophiles sent to Watchtower. And so now Watchtower is washing their hands from this responsibility and saying it's not our job, it's not our fault, it's not our responsibility, and we're going to protect this pedophile database. But we all know that they claimed, oh, well, they couldn't do a search in their computer and stuff. But it's coming up about the other case. Page 16. Watchtower resisted production as many of the communications contained information protected by confidentiality of confession. Further, Watchtower asserted the privacy rights of those individuals mentioned in the communications. So now here they're saying it's the privacy rights of the pedophiles on that database, that they were protecting them and didn't want that information to get put into court record. So what is it, Watchtower? You know, they're going to have all these different excuses. Point A, California refused to preserve confidentiality for the communications between Jehovah's Witnesses and their spiritual counselors. In Trammell versus United States, this court described the seriousness of the need to preserve confidence in the communications between persons and their spiritual counselors. Most states recognize that need and extend evidentiary privilege to interfaith communications. California's recognition is limited to protecting only interfaith communications based upon the Catholic model of confession. One-on-one. Now this is a biggie, guys. Pay attention. Involving one clergy member and one penitent. The Bible provides for multiple elders to be involved in confessional communications which are scripturally considered subject to the confidentiality of confession. James 5:14 through 16. California refuses to extend protection to such communications since they do not fit its rigid model of confession. Thus, the state has created an unconditional preference for a specific religious practice. And we all know they're talking about the Catholic Church and anyone else who has a one-on-one confidentiality. A state can decide whether or not to accord protection to confessional communications, but a religion must be allowed to decide what communications are part of its confessional practices. So the state is trying to say that the one-on-one, a clergy versus penitent, that is a confessional. Watchtower is saying, oh no, many elders can be involved in this confession. And then we know they call the legal department in New York, so they cross state lines with this confession, you know.
Which is a federal violation.
Yeah, now on page 18, California refused to preserve privacy rights for the communication between Jehovah's Witnesses and their spiritual counselors. Americans have the right to be let alone, the most comprehensive of rights and the most valued by civilized men. And they cite the case Olmsted versus United States, 277 U.S. 478, 1928. Then, if they have the right to be let alone, then what about all the members that are trying to fade and ex-members, our case included? You know, if you haven't seen it, go to JW Struggle and type in the search, how to disfellowship two people with zero proof. We even hired a lawyer to write a letter to our elders and the Watchtower Legal Department saying we just want to be left alone. We have that right to be left alone. Every single one of us leaving have the right to be left alone. But they're not practicing what they preach.
So for the very thing that the Watchtower Bible Tract Society is screaming for, just leave us alone, just leave us alone, we can govern ourselves, they will not put into practice within the congregations.
Yeah.
They won't do it. So here, that's a huge point of hypocrisy, because what they're begging for, they don't extend towards the members leaving. Just leave us alone. Let us leave with our dignity and our families intact. But this organization will not do that, because the Watchtower Bible Tract Society knows that if that communication is still left between exiting members, family members in the family, the exiting member will eventually wake up the member that is still under Watchtower control. Because the only way Watchtower can maintain the control is to make sure that the members still inside have no communication with those leaving.
Now this next part made me laugh, because I mean, it's like, talk about grasping at straws. Notably, one of Jehovah's Witnesses' firmly held Bible-based beliefs is those that are spiritually sick should seek confidential assistance from congregation elders. And they quote James 5:14 through 16. Penitent individuals open their hearts to their spiritual shepherds, confident that the information about their spiritual health remains private. Then they quote the HIPAA Act here in the United States of 1996 and say the HIPAA protects records that contain private information about physical and mental health. Records reflecting matters of spiritual health should be according the same level of protection. Do you guys understand what they're saying? That these perpetrators, these pedophiles, are mentally sick and need help from the elders, and so their records need to be protected under the HIPAA Act. Ay, ay, ay. So they care more about protecting pedophiles, and this just goes to a whole nother level of dark and evil, because they care more about
criminal activity
and protecting these pedophiles under the HIPAA Act than they do of protecting children. And that's where we have the issue.
And or protecting the unity of the family. They would rather destroy the unity of the family than expose or try to protect criminal activity.
Now, half of this petition is appendix and then court cases quoted and stuff like this. So we're going to go to Appendix C, 5A. Now here we have the factual and procedural history. And point A is FAC. And I haven't been able to see what FAC stands for, but it says that the facts in this subsection are taken from JW's FAC. Watchtower organized, administered, and directed the congregational affairs of Jehovah's Witnesses in the United States.
And we have to also make it clear that this JW is the plaintiff's initials, not to be confused with, you know, the JW's Watchtower.
It's the victim.
It's the victim, exactly.
Yeah, and a minor, because she was only 10 years old at the time.
Yes.
So we're going to, read what, they have stated in their FAC to the courts.
Right, regarding Watchtower. So they're trying to make the courts understand that despite what Watchtower says about the CCJW and how they're not related, these are facts of how Watchtower really operates.
Yeah, and we all know this is how Watchtower operates.
Yeah, but it's important to understand that the courts are being made to understand this.
Yeah, exactly. The organizational structure of the Jehovah's Witness Church is hierarchical in nature, and we know they have mentioned that in other court cases, and Watchtower has agreed to that. They have never fought that particular thing. The organizational head of the religion is the Watchtower. Authority flows downward from Watchtower to the local level of the church, which is made up of congregations. Watchtower is the head of the Jehovah's Witness hierarchical structure. Watchtower is directed by a governing body which is comprised of a fluctuating number of elders. Watchtower establishes processes for the discipline of members accused of wrongdoing, and receives and keeps records of determinations of disfellowship or of reproval of individuals appointed by Watchtower and ministerial servants or elders. In the hierarchical structure, the level below Watchtower is the circuit. Circuits are generally comprised of 20 to 22 congregations. The next level down consists of the local congregations, which are managed by a body of elders. And we all know, like it says in here, elders are the highest authority at the congregational level and direct door-to-door preaching activities, select potential candidates for becoming ministerial servants and elders, and organize weekly church meetings. Okay, let's go to Appendix C, 6A, the first full paragraph. To be appointed as an elder, a person must be a ministerial servant in good standing or have served as an elder in another congregation. The body of elders of the local church identifies potential candidates and determines whether they are suitable and if they live their life in accordance with appropriate morals. Once a candidate has been identified by the local church, a recommendation is made to Watchtower or later the CCJW, who have the ultimate authority as to whether a candidate is approved and becomes an elder. And then let's see, JW is a female. In July 2006, JW and Gilbert Simontal belonged to the Mountain View Congregation of Jehovah's Witnesses. Prior to July 2006, at a different congregation, Simontal served as a ministerial servant and as an elder. So the congregation would just automatically feel that he was a good associate and that their kids would be safe with this guy. I mean, he was an elder, by the way. Yeah, trustworthy.
You can trust the elders.
Yeah. Okay, we're on page 7A now, still in Appendix C. On July 15, 2006, J.W. and 3 other girls were invited to a slumber party at Simon Toll's home. Simon Toll had a daughter near the age of J.W. and the other invited girls. During that afternoon, Simon Toll joined the girls in a pool in the backyard. While in the pool, Simon Toll sexually molested J.W. and another girl, Jane Doe 1, in separate incidences. Doe 1's sister, Doe 2, had previously been molested on 2 occasions by Simon Toll. Now we have to remember that, because later on Watchtower is going to claim, well, like we've mentioned before, that they didn't know that he was dangerous. You know, they didn't know he was danger to children. Doe 1 and Doe 2 told their mother about Simon Toll molesting them. The mother contacted an elder of the congregation and a judicial committee was convened. Simon Toll admitted he molested Doe 2 on 2 occasions and that he molested Doe 1 twice on July 15th. The judicial committee reproved Simon Toll. Reproved him. Didn't kick him out, didn't disfellowship, just reproved him. Okay, the school was notified of the abuse and reported it to law enforcement. Approximately 2 months after July 15th, J.W.'s parents received a telephone call from the Murrieta Police Department asking if Simon Toll sexually abused J.W. J.W.'s father, which will now be known as father in the documents here, spoke to the elders of the Mountain View congregation who advised father that J.W. did not have to speak with the police. J.W. and her family began attending a different congregation, the French Valley Congregation of Jehovah's Witnesses. Unbeknownst to J.W. and her family, Simon Toll also moved to the French Valley Congregation. Approximately 1 year after July 2006, J.W. informed her parents of the extent of Simon Toll's sexual touching. J.W.'s parents spoke to the police and then to the elders of the French Valley Congregation. The elders came to J.W.'s home and interrogated J.W., who was approximately 10 years of age, about the abuse in explicit detail. And we know this is what they do.
Yep.
This is what they do. See, when they moved into this French Valley congregation, why didn't the elders from the Mountain View contact the congregation and say, hey, look, you know, this guy that just moved over there, you know, I'm sure they sent his publisher card. Why didn't they send a letter, you know, warning the congregation?
Mm-hmm.
But they didn't. Let's see. J.W. and her parents were very upset by the explicit nature of the questions asked and the depth to which the elders probed for information. And we've heard this, you know, in the Australian Royal Commission and many, many times about how explicit the elders' questions get and the details they want. So we can see now why that policy has been changed to where the victim doesn't even have to talk to the elders or the perpetrator. Father told the elders that he was thinking of requesting a restraining order against Simon Toll. The elders told Father that he did not need to speak to the police and that to do so would bring reproach on the congregation. And we've heard this many, many times also.
Well, that's the control mechanism. That's the fear. Why would you bring reproach on Jehovah's organization? That's how they get away with hiding criminal activity.
Exactly. In 2 criminal cases, Simon Toll was found guilty of molesting Jane Doe 1 and 2 and J.W. And then they have a footnote that says the criminal appellate case concerning Doe 1 and Doe 2 is People versus Simon Toll, August 10th, 2009, and then they've got the number there. Okay, we're going to go over to Appendix C, page 29A. At the very bottom, the court explained that Watchtower's motion for relief was brought only after Watchtower produced the 1997 documents in a San Diego case. Now I'm going to explain that. Now, we all know that they said they could not produce these documents because they couldn't, you know, do a search on their computer for all of these documents, and it would take them years to go through all of this. Well, I'm not going to read this whole page, but they you know, created a program so they could do a search. And this is where we realized there was 2 separate cases. Now, let me reread that, and then I've got a comment. The court explained that Watchtower's motion for relief was brought only after Watchtower produced the 1997 documents in a San Diego County case. Now they're talking about these intracommunications, the pedophile database. So, if they produced those documents for this San Diego County case, and now they're trying to say they couldn't produce them for this case because it violated the privacy of all these pedophiles. I mean, come on, my goodness. Why aren't you crying, you know, privacy and HIPAA, you know, Act confidentiality instead of producing them for this other case?
See, again, Watchtower is saying too much because us ex-members can point out the hypocrisy at an unbelievable rate. We can see what Watchtower's doing here and why they do not have Almighty God's backing.
Yeah. Because Watchtower knew of the computer problems in May of 2014, but they never, you know, brought that up, and thus could have raised them in January 2015. The trial court concluded there was not a satisfactory explanation for Watchtower's failure to raise the computer issue in January 2015. So, you know, they could have claimed a computer issue because they claimed when they tried to do a search for this pedophile database that their system crashed. And like I said, this is a very interesting read that actually starts like on Appendix C, page 28A. And you might want to read this whole section, you know, but yet they produced these documents for this other court case in San Diego.
Right.
But
so basically what they're saying is that we couldn't produce the document you need for case B, but earlier in the timeline we did produce documents for case A. And there again,
lies.
Another instance of them lying and saying too much.
Yeah. Now, Appendix C, page 30A, damages, point G. I want to read the last sentence. The trial court entered judgment in favor of JW in the amount of $4 million,
Yeah,
and
4
some
million,
odd
yeah.
dollars. But I wanted to go over to Appendix C, 37A. First full paragraph. Watchtower contends proximate cause was not sufficiently pled because Watchtower relinquished control over congregational affairs to the CCJW. In JW's fact, she alleged, while supervised, directed, and controlled by defendants Mountain View, French Valley, Watchtower, and CCJW, Gilbert Simontal committed the acts of childhood sexual abuse alleged herein. Thus, JW's allegations reflect that Watchtower was responsible for supervising Simontal at the time of the molestation. And Watchtower contends that the proximate cause was not sufficiently pled, and they go into all of that again. Okay, there's just a couple more interesting things here. I know this is getting long. Appendix C, 39A, the first paragraph about halfway down. Watchtower is asserting the lack of a written order compelling further discovery led to confusion about the required discovery, and thus Watchtower lacked notice of what was required, and therefore the terminating sanctions were improper. So here now is another excuse they're using, that they did not understand that they were to produce this pedophile database.
These are lawyers, friends, Jehovah's Witnesses. You're going to sit and tell me that the lawyer doesn't understand he's required to produce the pedophile database?
Well, I love the court's response because the trial court February 11, 2014 minute order reads, "Motion is granted and denied in part. Ruling as stated on the record. At the hearing on the motion for terminating sanctions, Watchtower did not express confusion regarding the February 11, 2014 order compelling further discovery. At the sanctions hearing, the trial court asked, 'You're agreeing that there is an order that it has not complied with, but that the sanction is improper?' Watchtower responded, 'Correct.'
So they did understand.
It appears from Watchtower's response that it understood the February 11, 2014 minute order because Watchtower agreed there was an order and agreed it had not complied with the order."
Go ahead.
Watchtower did not argue it was confused or that the February 11th minute order should be interpreted in a different manner.
So then why petition the Supreme Court of the United States of America? You've already admitted you understood the order, so there's no point in taking this case to the Supreme Court. The only thing you're trying to do, Watchtower, is to buy yourself some time, not having to fork over the millions of dollars that you've been fined.
Yeah, and I mean, it appears they're grasping at straws and trying every little excuse they can think of
not to pay the fine.
Back to the petition. Moreover, in March 2014, Watchtower filed a motion to set aside the trial court's order compelling production in response to RFP 66, which indicates Watchtower understood the court ordered Watchtower to produce the 1997 documents. Accordingly, because Watchtower understood that it was ordered to produce the 1997 documents, we conclude its right of due process was not violated. So then they say Watchtower contends its right of due process was violated because on February 11, 2014, Judge Peterson did not rule on Watchtower's objections to RFP 66. Okay, Appendix C, 41A. First paragraph. The court continued, turning to the issue of privacy. Now this is talking about the pedophile database. Watchtower cites no authority that there is a privacy right in this case. However, even if there is one, disclosure of information relating to sexual predators of children outweighs any privacy. I'm going to repeat that. The court continued, turning to the issue of privacy. Watchtower cites no authority that there is a privacy right in the case. However, even if there is one, disclosure of information relating to sexual predators of children outweighs any privacy. And I feel the same way.
Well, of course.
That comes from the clergy cases. And they have many cases cited, you know, in all of these court cases that's the thing. Disclosure of information relating to sexual predators or children outweighs any privacy. Done deal. If I was on that Supreme Court,
that's right,
you know, as a justice, done. Watchtower, it doesn't care if your amendments and your rights are violated.
And the reason why, because the courts recognize that this is a crime and not a sin, Watchtower.
Yeah.
Just like we're all aware that child sexual abuse is a crime.
About halfway down in the first paragraph, as to the penitent clergy privilege, first of all, J.W. argues collateral estoppel. The court does not accept that argument. Watchtower herein argues that just because the information is shared by a congregation of elders should not take them out of the privilege. However, the Roman Catholic Archbishop of Los Angeles case clearly states and holds that when the communication is shared, the privilege is waived. The court has also reviewed the attorney-client and the attorney-work product issues. Now, when you go to Appendix C, 42A, under the subheading point C, terminating sanctions, Watchtower contends the trial court erred by imposing terminating sanctions because it was too severe of a sanction. So they're complaining about the $4 million.
And they care nothing about the child that was abused, or the children that was abused.
I think this is the last one I have highlighted in this petition, Appendix C, 49A. In Watchtower's motion, it explains that terminating sanctions were granted on February 2nd, 2015, and at the end of March 2015, Watchtower developed the ability to search the 1997 documents. Okay, so they're talking about that pedophile database. Okay? So Watchtower developed the ability to search those documents. Watchtower continued, accordingly, being now able to produce the documents ordered by this court, Watchtower is offering to do so on a rolling basis as it is doing in a San Diego County case. So now they're offering to produce these documents. But I thought they said it was a privacy issue under the HIPAA.
Right.
See, now they're saying, oh, we're willing to, offering to do so on a rolling basis as it is doing in the San Diego County case. So they've given them now to this other case in San Diego. Watchtower has not explained a mistake or error that occurred prior to February 2nd. Rather, Watchtower has set forth a change in circumstance. The new circumstance is that Watchtower gained the ability to search the 1997 documents. A change in circumstance does not equate with a mistake or error. Accordingly, to the extent Watchtower's motion could be construed as seeking equitable relief, the trial court did not abuse its discretion in denying the motion because excusable neglect was not shown. In sum, the trial court did not err.
So let me explain that in terms that you Jehovah's Witnesses will understand and comprehend more fully regarding that last paragraph and the change in circumstances. It equates to this within your congregations. You're driving down the road and you see your brother come out of a motel room with a woman other than his own wife. Now you know that he's committed adultery. What happens at that point within the congregation? If you go and tell the elders, hey, I saw so-and-so do this, that changes the circumstances of that person getting disfellowshipped or just getting privately reproved because that person did not confess to the sin himself or herself for that matter. But if a husband or a wife commits the sin and feels so sorry, so repentant that they go to the elders and they confess the sin themselves, then the circumstances changes. They may not get disfellowship. Why? Because no other eyes saw the sin. The only reason why Watchtower is done what they've done because the circumstances have changed, and the circumstances was this: we can't access the database. Our system's going to crash, yada yada yada. But then all of a sudden, like a miracle from God, they produced the file. Why? Because the circumstances where they were getting fined on a daily basis, the circumstances changed because it was going to cost them a tremendous amount of money by not producing the database.
My conclusion on this petition, there is a pedophile database. So for all those Jehovah's Witnesses and apologists and just downright ornery, trolls who say there isn't such a thing, these court documents prove there is a pedophile database. Watchtower is using every excuse, grasping at straws to get out of paying this court fine of $4 million plus. And if the Supreme Court is smart, they will see that it all boils down to one simple little thing. Predators of children should not be allowed, and they are not entitled to privacy.
That's right.
And this database needs to be released. And we know that it isn't just here in the United States. Congregations worldwide have these files.
See, the Watchtower Bible Tract Society knows that due to circumstances no longer under their control, once this database is out, the religion is all but done. Because the people at the doors, the people walking by their little shopping carts, their little literature carts, will know that this organization is a criminal organization, that they've been fleecing the flock in the name of God. And it makes them even worse than most of the religions out there, because the Jehovah's Witnesses are known as door-to-door evangelizers. That will come to an end, because Watchtower knows that there's no longer going to be any growth from the door-to-door activity. And all of you Jehovah's Witnesses that still think that you can reach the public through your door-to-door activity, or even standing by your little literature carts, is over. And in fact, the very fact that ex-members are approaching the Jehovah's Witnesses at these literature carts proves how ineffective you people now are in your evangelical work.
Okay, now along these lines, referring to Jehovah's Witnesses on trial, I'm going to put the link down below to this article. It's SWR News. Now, it's in German. There is a video attached with this, and I'm actually going to put the video at the end after we say goodbye, so anyone who wants to grab it, who speaks German and wants to cover this, please do. I had to use Google Translate, so you'll have to excuse, there's some kind of miswords. But criminal charges against Jehovah's Witnesses for trial fraud have been filed in Stuttgart by the Victims Protection Organization. Now, I'll just read this real quick. Members of a victim protection organization have filed criminal charges against leading members of Jehovah's Witnesses at the police headquarters in Stuttgart. I know I'm probably mispronouncing that one. The organization accuses the religious community of process fraud. The corresponding, they have advertising, but it's video. The corresponding video is available to the SWR. The Victim Protection Organization, Jehovah's Witnesses, Upper Hill, accuses those responsible for the Christian fundamentalist religious community of trial fraud because they have deceived the authorities in court. And we just read the petition. That's no surprise. It's nothing new. They've been doing this for decades. You can go to YouTube and find recordings from trial where elders, look at the Australian Royal Commission, they lied outright. All of them, including governing body Jeffrey Jackson, outright lied. Okay, so then they have the video. The trials involved the recognition of Jehovah's Witnesses as the state-privileged public corporation.
See, state privilege. See, in Germany, it's a privilege to be a public corporation. That privilege, just like losing your privileges of passing the mics, Jehovah's Witnesses, is being taken away in the country of Germany because they recognize that this organization is committing court fraud.
In Baden-Württemberg, the recognition took place in 2015. This was preceded by legal proceedings, for example, in Berlin. Now, in this next part, they're going to use the word dropouts in the article, or at least Google Translate did, but we know it means ex-members. Jehovah's Witnesses pressured members. The ex-member Bernard Boschall and Udo Oppenmeyer, justify the criminal charges, among other things, that the Jehovah's Witnesses pressured members if they continued to keep contact with ex-members. This violates the protection of marriage and family demanded by the Basic Law. In court, the Jehovah's Witnesses would have presented this differently. In addition, members of the Jehovah's Witness Victim Assistance claim that members of the religious community, and they've got the translation wrong, we know they are pressured not to accept blood transfusions in the event of life-threatening illnesses. In addition, sexual abuse within Jehovah's Witnesses is often not cleared up. In practice, despite all the public protestations of the Jehovah's Witness leadership, there is a provision according to which abuse will only be punished in the religious community if the victim can present a second eyewitness. Ex-members, you have to look behind the scenes. An organization like the Jehovah's Witnesses in Germany should not also have state privileges, said the representatives of Jehovah's Witnesses Victim Aid to the SWR. The dropout ex-member Bernard Boschall said, "If you look behind the scenes, what happened at the awarding of the corporation in Berlin that was cheated there, then the question arises, or lies, whether the rule of law after all these years, not just behind it looks." Like I said, Google Translate. Jehovah's Witnesses reject allegations, of course, and they're going to lie in court and to the authorities. Okay, back to the article. The German headquarters of the Jehovah's Witnesses in Selters in Hesse rejected the allegations against the SWR in writing. The Jehovah's Witnesses in Germany have so far been right in all cases in the issue in question. The members of Jehovah's Witnesses were also free to decide who they wanted to contact, whether they wanted to file a complaint with the police, or what kind of medical treatment they were seeking. So of course they're going to defend Watchtower.
Right.
However, under the proviso that they so literally implement the prescribed by the Bible scale. And like I said, Google Translate's a little off, but I'm going to put the link down below in this. And for those of you who speak German, maybe you can do a better job of this and not slaughter the names.
What it really boils down to is that there's a group of ex-members in Germany alerting the courts, alerting the judicial systems in Germany that these Jehovah's Witnesses are committing an act of fraud. And because it is a privilege to have a 501c3. Now, I don't know if it's a 501c3 or not in Germany, but it is a state license to operate as a religion. That state license is being challenged because they are committing fraudulence. They are lying to the courts about who and what Jehovah's Witnesses are in Germany. See, as it read, Watchtower will say, well, you have the right to accept a blood transfusion. Every Jehovah's Witness knows you do not have that right. Every Jehovah's Witness knows, despite what Watchtower says, well, you can still talk to your family members. We know you can't do that without threat of being expelled yourself. So it's very, very important that these groups of ex-members continue to bring these policies forward. That's why we have this entire bookshelf of Watchtower literature, because it's this literature that the Watchtower Bible Tract Society is choking on right now, because this literature, these statements that they've made, you know, in years past, we don't have a clergy class like, you know, the false religions of the world do. We don't have. This is a brotherhood. This is a theocracy. Now, what are they trying to do? They're trying to hide behind, well, we do have a clergy class. No, your own literature stated years ago, decades ago, that you do not. And it's this. Again, it's a case of Watchtower saying too much. And now they're choking on their own words.
Now, we did a video years ago, and I don't remember what the name of it was, but we covered the word theocracy. Look it up in the dictionary. It does not mean God rule. It actually means state, aka government rule.
That's right.
So look it up in your dictionary. It's not what Jehovah's Witnesses have been saying. That was a shock and eye-opener for us when we first came out, because we were always taught theocracy meant God rule. It does not. Now, getting back to Mike said, you know, we don't know what it's called in Germany. Well, the article says that it is called a state-privileged public corporation. So, you know, we would view it as a 501c3 here in the United States. But in Germany, it is a state-recognized public corporation. It doesn't say religion. It says public corporation. So, anyway, like I said, I'm going to put the video that is in German right after we say goodbye, so that any of those who want to grab it, you know, and do your video in German, we would appreciate it. You know, get this word out. And Watchtower is coming under fire by the courts.
Right.
So it's not Satan's system turning on them. It's their own lying and their own, you know, mess-ups and liability that is condemning them, you know, and protecting the pedophiles instead of, you know, protecting the children and the congregations. They are liable. They are responsible. And I hope they, you know, the United States Supreme Court shuts them down on this and denies their petition.
So I guess that about wraps us up.
That was a long one.
Thanks for watching. And always, thank you for your comments. And
your information, you know.
Yes.
All you are sending this information to us, so thank you so much. We appreciate your help. And, you know, we couldn't get all this information if it wasn't for you guys. So thank you.
Yes. Bye.
Bye.
Jahrzehntelang, so erzählen sie, hätten sie gelitten unter dem religiösen Fundamentalismus der Zeugen Jehovas. Nach ihrem Ausstieg haben sie sich im Verein Jehovah's Witnesses Opferhilfe zusammengeschlossen. Sie wollen es nicht länger hinnehmen, dass die Zeugen Jehovas als Körperschaft des öffentlichen Rechts auch noch eine Vorzugsbehandlung durch den Staat bekommen, etwa in steuerlichen Fragen. Deshalb stellen sie jetzt beim Betrugsdezernat in Stuttgart Strafanzeige.
Wenn wir heute durch die Königstraße in Stuttgart gehen, sehen wir sie stehen mit ihrem Wachturm und jeder sagt, naja, das Mütterchen oder das Väterchen will halt den Wachturm hier andrehen. Alles gut und schön, aber wenn man mal hinter die Kulissen schaut und sieht, was bei Verleihung der Körperschaft geschehen ist in Berlin, dass da, und ich betone nach meiner Meinung, betrogen wurde, um die Körperschaft des öffentlichen Rechtes zu erlangen. Also da stellt sich mir dann schon die Frage, ob nicht der Rechtsstaat jetzt mal nach all den Jahren vielleicht doch noch mal dahinter schaut. Deswegen bin ich heute hier.
Vor seinem Ausstieg war Udo Obermeier jahrelang Gemeindeleiter bei den Zeugen Jehovas. Was ihn am meisten umtreibt, ist die religiös begründete Ablehnung von Bluttransfusionen, also auch von lebensrettenden und auch bei Kindern. Aber ist das wirklich so? Wir fragen bei der Deutschlandzentrale der Zeugen Jehovas nach. Verbot von Bluttransfusionen?
Dieser Vorwurf wurde abschließend von den höchsten Gerichten Deutschlands untersucht. Die Gerichte erkannten an, dass jedes unserer Mitglieder bereits vor seiner Taufe eine selbstbestimmte Entscheidung über seine medizinische Behandlung trifft.
Selbstbestimmt, Udo Obermeier wirft den Zeugen Jehovas vor, in der Praxis viele Mitglieder massiv unter Druck zu setzen.
Ich kenne mehrere Fälle, unter anderem 2 Mütter mit kleinen Kindern, die Bluttransfusion abgelehnt haben, gestorben sind mit katastrophalen Auswirkungen auf die Familien, auf die Kinder. Die sind schwer traumatisiert, die Kinder auch als Erwachsene noch, sogar bis zum Suizid.
Deshalb wirft er den Zeugen Jehovas vor Gericht nicht die Wahrheit gesagt zu haben. Wurde der Status einer Körperschaft des öffentlichen Rechts also erschlichen? Nein, sagt die Pressestelle der Zeugen Jehovas in Deutschland.
Wir sehen uns gemäß dem biblischen Standpunkt verpflichtet, die Wahrheit zu reden. Auch haben wir nichts zu verbergen, weshalb es keinen Grund gab oder gibt, irgendetwas erschleichen zu müssen.
Ein weiterer Vorwurf in der Strafanzeige: Kindesmissbrauch werde innerhalb der Gemeinschaft häufig nicht aufgeklärt, und zwar durch eine religiöse Regel, nach der ein Opfer immer noch 2 oder 3 Augenzeugen beibringen muss. Auch diesen Vorwurf weist die Zentrale in Selters zurück. Es stehe jedem frei, zur Polizei zu gehen. Bereits zuvor hatten sich die Mitglieder der Zeugen Jehova Opferhilfe auch an den Petitionsausschuss des Landtags gewandt. Der konnte ihnen zwar nicht weiterhelfen, die Ausschussvorsitzende empfiehlt den Aussteigern aber, nicht aufzugeben.
Wir haben sie bestärkt darin, dass sie auch den Rechtsweg beschreiten sollen, dass sie die Anklage jetzt oder die Anzeige erstatten sollen. Und da werden wir auch ganz intensiv mit dabei sein.
Das haben die 3 jetzt getan und sind erleichtert, dass ihre Anzeige gegen die Zeugen Jehovas jetzt zumindest geprüft wird.